As we head into the cooler months here in the US, I thought a good topic for today's video would be what are some foods with some warming properties? And if you're confused by it at first, think about how you felt the last time you ate a chili pepper or some horseradish or had a glass of wine. You might feel your temperature go up in your body. Well, this is a very simple example of that, and there are many other examples of the ways in which what we eat could make us feel warmer. And I know some of you really dread the winter because you dread feeling cold, and not only feeling cold, but sometimes if you have feelings of anxiousness or cracking joints, dry skin, this could be a sign, according to some theories, that you have an excess buildup of coolness in your body and you might benefit from eating some more warming foods. I thought it would be helpful to talk about the energetics of food, and by that I mean that some foods are thought to generate heat in the body and some foods are thought to generate coolness in the body. So that's how we're going to talk about it today. Now, the topic of the energetics of food isn't something that's widely discussed here in the US, but I feel like it's catching on and more people are talking about it. And truth be told, it's been around for a very long time. So I thought I'd talk about it in the context of two different popular medical systems. There is traditional Chinese medicine, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, and there's Ayurveda, which is the Indian version of that system. And there's a lot of overlap and there's some differences as well. But each has been around for thousands and thousands of years and widely practiced. And a lot of this stuff had to come about before we had modern inventions. So before you might have had, central heat or a boiler or furnace in your home, they had to find other ways of staying warm besides just a fire or, maybe like a wood-burning stove, something like that. We had to get creative. They had to layer more. They had to maybe eat certain foods, and they used it to treat illnesses when there was thought to be an imbalance in the body of too much heat or too much coolness. And we'll get a little bit more into that later. Let's talk about some of the foods that traditional Chinese medicine suggests that you might want to consume more of during the cooler months. So there are things like ginger and cinnamon, which probably doesn't come as a surprise to you. There's also ginseng and red dates, meat stews, especially lamb. They believe that lamb is the most warming out of all of the meats. And then there's also congee, which is the rice porridge. So again, this is not an exhaustive list, but some examples of foods that they think have a warming quality to them. And what I found interesting too was that when I was researching both Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, there was a list of foods where they recommended that you avoid that had these cooling properties to them. So although you may not want to consume them as much during the winter, consuming them during the summer could be very beneficial. So these were things like basically raw foods and like smoothies, salads, things like that. Now, Ayurveda suggests eating warm, cooked, slightly oily, and spiced foods. So again, like your ginger, cinnamon, for example, but then also they recommend using a lot of fats. So ghee, sesame oil also has a warming quality to it. And they also believe that veggies, for example, a good way to prepare them is by steaming them. They suggest a lot of soups and stews, and this is a good time to be eating meat and shellfish as well. They also say that alliums have a warming quality to them. So onions, garlic, leeks, and also nuts and seeds. All this being said, both schools of thought really advocate that it depends largely on your personal constitution. So for example, going back to that thing I was talking about where some people really have a hard time during the winter, whereas other people maybe not so much, that could be because you have a naturally warmer, more heat generating constitution. So it's not, the point isn't to completely eradicate all of the cooling properties in one's body during the cooler months. It's just to have more of that balance, and whatever that balance looks like for you personally. So in traditional Chinese medicine, there's yin and yang, probably yang, I think I'm pronouncing that wrong. But then also in Ayurveda, there's the three different doshas, they call them, the Vata, the Pitta, and the Kapha. So we are going into a very yin season if you're talking traditional Chinese medicine, times of being cool and looking more inward. They also say that it's like the more feminine side. And then also they're going into Vata season if we're talking about it in Ayurvedic terms. Now, if you've been overdoing it on some of the warmer foods, and you have a warmer constitution, in order to bring yourself back into balance, there are foods that you can find during the winter time that have cooling properties. So for example, there's coconut, whether that's the flesh or the milk. Chamomile tea is an example. It also has a slightly demulcent quality to it, so very soothing. And there's mint and pears and leafy greens. So if you think about it this time of year, you can readily find kale and collard greens, cabbage as well. I wanted to show you all an example of a food that contains both warming and cooling properties. So for example, there's a lot of garlic and ginger and scallion in here, and gochugaru, which are the hot pepper flakes. These all have warming qualities. However, the main base of it is cabbage, of course, and there's also some daikon, and these have cooling properties. So when you eat this food, it is in balance because it's got both of those warm and cool properties to it. Green tea is another one that's considered cooling. So whereas coffee and black tea are considered warming, they say that green tea has a cooling property to it. Now, luckily, a lot of this is intuitive. During the warmer months, we tend to crave soups and stews and have roasts and, have spiced foods and warm beverages more than we would during the summer months. However, I can see in a world where we're more easily to control our climate, where we can find all kinds of produce all throughout the year, not just during certain seasons, how we have maybe gotten a little bit out of alignment there. And so I'm hoping that by doing this video on the warming properties of food, if you find that you're uncomfortable during the winter, if you're looking just for extra ways to eat the right nourishing foods for you, for the best, what am I trying to say, in the best way for your body type, then these are a list of foods that you might want to try. That's all I have for today. Stay warm, and I will see you all again soon.